dropping the hammer.
No, you're not.
Anyway, Matt Weber, welcome back to Dropping the Hammer. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I guess we're recording. How long have we been recording?
I pressed recording the second you popped in.
Oh wow. Okay. Well then I don't know how many. I guess I didn't say anything that was.
No, I'm gonna cut out all of that. So,
okay. I know sometimes I can be unruly, so this part is recording, so I can say this on the record. Sometimes I can be a little politically incorrect, and I can be a little unruly. I can be.
I don't think I've ever heard you be politically incorrect.
No, I can be on my best behavior. I can be very. No, here's the truth. I wrestle with two competing parts of my personality, and one wants to be a very straight-laced, very cordial and nuanced. I want to be Nate Ryan. Right? There's a part of me that wants to be, Nate.
Are you carrying a dictionary around with you when you're in that mode?
Well, I feel like sometimes I'm good for like a tweet that makes people go, huh? And I think the one on Sunday night for the Bristol race was anathema. And people are like, Anna who? And I'm like, well, I've always considered myself kind of a poor man's Nate Ryan. So there's a part of me that, yeah, that's me. But there's also probably a part of me that's kind of, I guess a really good analogy would be like Bromberg, who like, I really like Bromberg. And I think that there's parts of Bromberg that is so obviously, he sees the button in front of him and he just likes to push it. And I appreciate that. But I also think that Nick is super smart. And I think that oftentimes the things that Nick puts on the table for debate, argument, and conversation are sometimes necessary topics too. So I think sometimes I'm a little bit of both. I can be nuanced, but I can be kind of hard hitting and not politically correct too. And I wrestle with those two, elements of my personality.
Okay. So anyway, it's Tuesday, April 19th at 5:08 p.m. Central Time anyway. And we're just under about an hour since Speedway Motorsports announced that we're going to get Bristol on Dirt episode 3 next year. So and that's after, a few hours after the ratings came out for Sunday's race. 4.007 million people tuned in, which is the most anyone has watched any Bristol race, fall, spring, whatever, in 6 years. Were you surprised by that?
I wasn't. So there's a part of me that I liked having Easter weekend off because, and I said this over the weekend too, this is the first weekend where the burnout starts to kick in. And especially me with my short track stuff too, like I really feel the burnout. And I've always enjoyed Easter because typically short track racing steers clear of Easter, NASCAR steers clear of Easter. In the past where I've done a ton of IndyCar, they've steered clear of Easter. And so I needed that weekend to kind of just take one weekend off, and we don't have that this year.
Hey, Dover's coming up. Just take that weekend off.
Well, I got Talladega, and I'm doing some Cars Tours stuff. I think I'm finally going to have a weekend at home where I'm not doing anything. Not this weekend, but the weekend after that. I think it is Dover weekend, actually. There's no short track stuff on my agenda either. But the reason that I enjoy having Easter off is there's nothing else going on. So it's the one weekend a year where I could completely detach from racing, from sports, from entertainment. And so for all of those reasons that I liked having Easter off, that was the reason that it made sense for NASCAR to try this and for Fox Sports to try this. Not a lot of competition. There's the NBA playoffs, and they were number one in the weekend on TV ratings. And so I understood.
And they were also up for the first time in a while, like their highest numbers in years. So,
and so yeah. I I saw the merit of trying it. And once I got to Bristol, it's Bristol, and I kind of enjoy the dirt experiment. We can get into that. But I understood all the reasons to do it on Easter, and it worked out for them. And I
Yeah.
think they're making this racing product better too, and we can get into that too with this car.
We're getting into all of it, man. We're just
Yeah,
gonna
with the
get we're
track.
just gonna get in there.
So when you throw it all together in a,
Yeah.
blender very broadly, I understand why they're doing it. It would make sense to do it again on Easter, make it a new tradition, I guess. So yeah, it makes sense.
So earlier today, I just Googled what was the highest rated NASCAR race ever. I couldn't really find anything definitive, but I saw things where 20 years ago there was races pulling in 20 million viewers. I was like, wow.
A different era though, right? I mean, you had most people had 38 channels, and they didn't have the
Netflix, streaming services, video game consoles connected to the internet.
Anytime we talk ratings, and I know you know this, so I'm not talking down to you, but I would encourage all the listeners, viewers, however you're consuming this, just understand it's not very comparable because the world is just so different. But your point's on point.
So this is I was about to get into it. That was for 4 million viewers. That it's weird that we're saying, oh wow, that's a lot compared to 20 years ago. But the media landscape is so fractured. So when you get stuff like last year's experiment was Mother's Day, ratings came back, big jump from I forgot what they were actually comparing it to, but it was still a big jump. And now you do Easter, and those were the two things that the sacred dates. We don't race on these dates. You could do that. You could be sacred about stuff like that when you were pulling in 20 million a race. Yeah. We could take a week off, no big deal. You can't do that now. There are you can't hold anything sacred when you're just trying to get to 4 million. And this probably this is just a huge conversation to have. The rebound that NASCAR is experiencing this year, starting with, hey, it didn't rain at the Daytona 500. Thank goodness. And the uptick we've seen in the set or 8, is it 8 or 9 races since? Was this race 9 or 8? I keep forgetting.
In my head, it's 10, but I might be counting the Coliseum too, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
maybe
9 points races.
Oh, you're right. So actually, the rebound started with the Coliseum, with just huge jump from what it saw last year. But everything we've been doing, in my opinion, I was thinking about this, in the half hour before we started this, was this could have been happening 5 years ago. Should have been happening 5 years ago. But 5 years ago, we were still in a 5-year agreement between NASCAR and the tracks and stuff. That everything was locked in for 5 years. And it's okay, great. And also at that time, NASCAR and SMI were still public companies. So finally, after I can't remember when that 5-year agreement ended. Was it 18, 19?
I want to say maybe was it 20?
I don't know. I just remember each passing year we were ticking down. Okay, when's this agreement going to end? And then it did. And then both SMI and NASCAR finally went private. And here we are with big, bold decisions when it comes to the scheduling. And now we're finally seeing the investment and all that pay off through these first, 8 races, except for Martinsville, the outlier, which it was a race on Fox Sports 1, which has me concerned because this weekend at Talladega is the last Fox race that's on Big Fox for 4 straight FS1 races. So I'm now, clutching my pearls. All right, what will be the positive spin that we have to endure after this weekend at Talladega?
Well, also remember too, and listen, I see it on social, so I'm sure you do too. People are like, well, this is why every race should be on Big Fox and Big NBC, and people forget the trade-off that the sanctioning body makes is that okay, well, we're going to have less races, fewer races on broadcast television to get more upfront, cash from
Yeah.
the broadcasts who are trying to grow a channel like
Hmm.
Fox Sports One or the former NBC Sports Network. That's a trade-off. And the next conversation NASCAR is going to have, it's going to be number of races on over the air, cable, and then streaming. We saw it
Yeah.
with IndyCar's new deal, having some races on the NBC Sports app. Um, that's the trade-off. So would NASCAR want to have more races on broadcast? Yes, but they also want more billions as well. And Steve O'Donnell had said it today on the Sirius XM channel. He had said their consideration about running a race on Easter was it was an opportunity to have one more race
Yeah.
on broadcast TV against less competition. So there's so many nuanced reasons that go into whether a race is on broadcast or on
Mhm.
cable or when it's on what time of day. Everyone wants 1 o'clock starts. I want 1 o'clock starts selfishly because no one reads my stories when races end at like 11 o'clock
Yeah.
midnight, especially with rain. And I know you've got this problem too. It's like when a race is at 1, people have all afternoon and evening to read your immediate post race stuff. And when
Yeah.
a race ends at midnight, they're not reading it at 1 o'clock in the morning. And typically they're not reading it on Monday morning either because they've moved on to work and other things. So selfishly, I want 1 o'clock starts just for the sake of my page views. Hey, newsflash. Weaver says he's all about the clicks. Yeah, he is because that's how we get.
You're all about having a job, isn't it great?
Right. I'm about being employed.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, let's get back. So Bristol, you were at Bristol, right?
yes.
Okay, so this is part 2 of Bristol. If we're okay, I mentioned earlier we're getting Bristol Dirt episode 3. So I'm gonna commit to the Star Wars phrasing. What would you have called? What would the title?
Episode 3 was pretty good. So
Yes, it was.
the ending was a little depressing, but
Well,
good.
that was expected. So if we're looking at a trilogy of Bristol Dirt, what would you have called? What would have been the title of the first entry, the first episode? Bristol Dirt, semicolon, what?
You've stumped me. You've flabbergasted me. I don't know that I've ever thought of like races as episodes, but they are. I mean fundamentally, right? If an entire season is the whole book
Mhm.
and the 36 or the chapters, I guess so. I've never thought of them as like episodic titles.
I thought of mine would be Bristol Dirt episode 1, the Dust Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have things that I think about each individual race, right? I mean, it was a Dust Bowl, and I think let's just get right on into it, right? I
Yeah.
think this race fundamentally addressed most of the challenges that they had with the first one, in the sense that the race was run under daytime conditions, which if anyone who follows even remotely dirt racing, you don't even have to be like an expert to know there's a reason why sprint cars and late models and modifieds, there's not a whole bunch of daytime races because the track ruts up and it gets dusty and it's just not good racing. And so it was puzzling from the start. They scheduled that as a day race and everything that could have happened there happened. With that said, I enjoyed that first race too, because to me, it just turned into a less grippy pavement race. And to me, it was just it was a half-mile pavement quote unquote race, but with no grip. It might as well have been Bernie Ecclestone putting on the sprinklers at Bristol, right?
Okay.
So I enjoyed watching drivers slide around and fight their cars and bounce off each other, but it wasn't a true dirt race. And I think that was kind of the pushback from not only dirt racing fans, but racing fans in general. It was like, well, if you're going to give us a dirt race, give us a real dirt race, which means not at Bristol. Well, it has to be at Bristol because it's Speedway Motorsports date. But I think Steve Swift, the director of operations at SMI, and his team, they went to work on building a better Bristol, and they added the progressive banking, which helped catch the cars when they were
Mhm.
sliding. Having the race at night actually gave them a lot more grip to work with, and an extra lane. It widened the track out, and uh, the new car, the next gen, um, with the wider, lower profile tires combined with the independent rear suspension, it was almost kind of like a rally car. I thought the way that the cars slid around on dirt, it was very rally car esque, and it's a kind of a similar setup to a rally car too. And I think it's going to get better,
Mhm.
even better in year three. And let me tell you why. There were so many, and we talked about this the last time we were on the show. There were so many problems getting this next gen car to the
Yeah.
track this year, and there still are, right? There's supply chain issues.
Which you mentioned, like that those headlines, that narratives kind of like faded into the background for the most part, kind of for the last
No,
month.
we're just not talking about it.
Well, yeah.
And unfortunately, we haven't had to talk about it because we're not really tearing cars up in mass. And I think the
Mhm.
bullet that was dodged was Atlanta, because we could have gone to Atlanta as an industry and tore up a ton of cars. And that race was pretty clean by a super speedway ish kind of
It
standard.
wasn't a. I mean, there were multi-car wrecks, but it wasn't a derby.
No,
Like,
no, cars weren't written off, right? They could take the
yeah.
cars back to the shop, and they had the inventory there. And I do think we're close to where it's not going to be an issue, which, we're going to Talladega, so let's strap in, right? But
Yeah.
I think we can get through Talladega and teams aren't writing cars off after Dega. I think we're probably going to be pretty okay on the supply chain and having parts and pieces. But back to Bristol. Getting this car to the track was such a challenge that getting the car ready for just Bristol specifically was an
Wasn't a priority.
afterthought.
Wasn't a
No,
priority. Yeah.
I mean, even with like the windscreen or the wire that they replaced the windshield with, right? They did that, so I don't want to say that it was tacky, but it was clear that it was not a priority. Let's just throw it on the week before the race.
I thought it was very, very strange that, oh yeah, we're doing this test a week before. It's
Yeah,
like,
right. Yeah.
I don't think this is a wholehearted test.
No, I think what happened is that they wanted to try to put the tire through its paces and make sure the tire they had was good on that track. And well, since we're here testing with Stu anyway, let's just throw this thing on and let's get a little bit of data. And if it hits a home run, we'll do it. But more than likely they knew it was not going to work, but it would give them a direction. So I think now that we know we're going back for that episode 3 at Bristol, I'm sure they can go test the next gen at any point this summer, the off season at another dirt track, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be at Bristol. I mean, just to be able to test
Mhm.
some kind of bars or windscreen or whatever you want to call it. I think just having the car be ready everywhere else will then allow them to look at the tire, maybe bring a slightly different tire. Although I think this tire did a really good job. I thought it did good racing things. Um, I think that will allow them to be a little bit more aggressive with track moisture. Although, like Kyle Busch said, God helped them out on Sunday, which I thought was a great line. We got all the help we could from God
Yeah.
on Easter. So,
Yeah.
God doing NASCAR solid, even though we're racing on, you know, one of the most sacrilege holidays.
Yeah.
So thanks, Lord.
Hey, that was maybe that was God's way of saying, hey, I like this too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
God's endorsement.
But listen, I think that if episode 2 is better than episode 1, it probably stands to reason that episode 3 is going to be better than episode 2. And
Well, I just appreciate that all the parties involved are learning from what didn't work. Like they're
yeah,
not sticking to their guns. Like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. It's they want this to be a good product.
no, yeah,
It showed like the interest in the show, not just with the ratings, but more people showed up at the track than last year, and just from the eye test, that's more people than that have attended the spring race since at least 2018, because we all
Yeah.
remember
I would
the
say
image
further.
from
I think I tweeted earlier. Well, I didn't tweet it. It was a Facebook comment. I think 16 or 17. It
because
was a good crowd.
yeah,
That
because
place
we
is so huge, and
yeah.
there's so many seats that it will never look the way some fans will want it to look. But the other thing too is that for the spring race, the last couple of years pre-pandemic, they were actually closing off
Oh, yeah. I was about to
sections
say,
of the
like,
thing.
we all remember the image of 2019, the spring
Mhm.
race, where the ends weren't even open.
Right. So I think
And
fans are thinking, well, I saw that race in 2019. And I saw people grouped together. Yeah, because they were forced to be because they couldn't sit in the corners or on the straights or
yeah,
wherever it was. And so they had enough people there this weekend that they didn't have to block off sections. And that was a really good crowd. And this is part of a larger thing here, right? Like my favorite thing about NASCAR right now is that, and listen, I'm not going to like everything. God knows
yeah,
there was an experiment they tried the last 3 years that did not work for me. And we all know how I felt about it. But beyond that, I do appreciate, and listen, I always said, even about NA18D, as much as I hated it, I appreciated the first year they tried it. I even sent Eric Jacuzzi, he's NASCAR's head aerodynamicist. I sent him a message the night of the All-Star race in 2018, which is the beginning of that package. I said,
yeah.
whether this works or doesn't work or whatever, I said, I just want you to know that as a fan, at my heart, I'm a racing fan. I appreciate that you guys are trying something just to make it better for fans. And I still felt that way, even over the next 3 years, where I was the loudest critic of that package. I did appreciate that they tried it. I just think they
Mhm.
tried it for far too long.
So we haven't actually gotten to talk about this since it
But
happened. So
I want to make a larger point though.
okay,
So,
okay,
and this is part of a larger thing that right now, after so many decades of the same schedule, the same
yeah,
car, with the same roster, we got into habits and it was so redundant. The
Mhm.
NASCAR experience had become redundant. And there were some things in that redundancy that we like. We like Martinsville, we like Bristol, and we like
Yeah,
road courses, but it was the same thing. And what I really love about NASCAR 2022 is everything feels so fresh and new, and we're trying stuff here and there, and we're going to continue as an industry to try different things, and it makes covering the sport a lot of fun.
oh
And I
yeah,
would think, as a fan, and I'm a fan too, I think it's fun for fans that even if you don't like dirt, or even if you don't like a street course, or even if you don't like this rules package or whatever, there's going to be a show for you at some point
Mhm.
in the year that's made for you, even if that show's not.
I mean, you don't have to like everything in a season. Like you're not obligated to. Um,
No.
like for up until last year, I hated pretty much every mile and a half track we went to. With the exception of like Chicagoland the final 2 years. Which
And that
sucks.
surface had gotten so good that
Yeah.
it overcame some of the shortcomings of the low power, high downforce. That surface was
Yeah.
so good and it ate up tires so well that they were lifting anyway. So it kind of overrided the package a little bit.
But yeah, like I was gonna start saying, like, we haven't gotten to talk about this since it happened, but how shocked were you at the about face back in December? Or I think it was December,
Yeah.
after the test at Charlotte. Like, oh, actually we might have said in November at Phoenix that we were committed to the 550 package on the next gen, but you know what? Actually, we're going to go 670 everywhere but the super speedways. How shocked are you?
Well, when is the last time we talked on the show? I feel like we didn't we do a show after that?
No,
Because
no.
I could have swore, and it might have been a different show, and I apologize if it was, but I've told this story a lot, and people didn't realize how it played out. So if I'm redundant, and if your audience has heard this story before, either on your show or elsewhere, I apologize. But I'm not surprised because I know how messy it got during the first Charlotte test, which was I guess that would have been in November, right? Yeah, it would have been November because it was right before the banquet. It was the week. It was late November, and that test where they were trying different versions of low horsepower, whether it's 500 to 550, and it just was not going well. And that is an understatement. I mean, I had phone calls from crew chiefs and engineers and crew members. I didn't attend the test, but I was trying to communicate with a lot of people and just kind of get a feel for what's happening. And there was one crew member, pal of mine, who says, I have never seen the mood this low in NASCAR in my life, in my career. It was
Really?
ugly. It was messy. There was lots of fighting. No one agreed on anything. The direction that was everyone was trying to get to, even in the sense that the what NASCAR wanted it to look like. The teams then went back to the sanctioning body and says, okay, well, if you want it to look like this, you're going to have to change the rules package to this. The tires are going to need to be this. You're going to have even less power, 450 horsepower. And NASCAR's like, no, we can't have 450 horsepower. Fans will reject that. He's like, well, they're rejecting it now. It's like, well, we need to have this type of close racing, but we need to do it the 500 to 550 range. And the teams are like, one, we can't. Two, we don't have the parts, and we can't buy the parts because it might make obsolete the parts that you've already made us buy. And that was the other part of it too. So we were really in the supply chain shortage then, and both the teams and the sanctioning body wanted to try a lot of things. You can't try a lot because you can't just buy parts for a spec car and then throw them away to do something different. So all of that is to say, it was a very messy process. And so then they went to the awards banquet in Nashville. And
I think I've heard about the meeting that they all
they
had.
had and they were able to get on the same page and say, we're going to try this. What turned into running the short track package everywhere, and everyone said, okay, well, let's try this and see what happens. And it went well enough at Charlotte. Charlotte's kind of like the barometer, right? I mean, listen, I love
we've had multiple discussions on the show with other. I've had it with other people on here. It's like, what are the three tracks that you really want to see what this car could do at? And for me, like the top three was like Auto Club, Charlotte, Richmond, and like Dover's number 4.
Yeah. So Charlotte is
passing colors.
Yeah. So Charlotte's a hard watch, and it's been a hard watch probably from the end of the COT era on, more or less, right? Listen, I like going to Charlotte, but over the past decade and a half or so, it's not been the industry's best foot forward.
Well, ever since they really repaved it, really.
Yeah. Actually, totally. Yeah.
It's been hasn't aged like
that surface is
at all.
No, it hasn't. So the mentality was, if we think that we can produce a mediocre show at Charlotte, and if we can go to Charlotte and have a mediocre test, then we're going to feel pretty good about it at some other places. And so as it turns out, they take that rules package to Fontana. And listen, Fontana is awesome because it's super abrasive and very fast. So okay, well, maybe you write that one off.
But yeah, it's usually it's fun for like the first 3 laps, and then it happens. But this year it's like, oh wow, this is, what is this? I'm not used to this. It was incredible.
But then they go to Vegas, and Vegas was very fun, right? It's kind of like, you watch a ton of old races. I thought the race at Vegas, outside of like the stages and stuff, you could show that to a fan, this race 2022, to a fan of NASCAR in like the mid 2000s, they would enjoy that show. It would look familiar to them. And I think that's kind of the goal here, is they want to create the kind of racing that captivated my generation back then. I think this car is doing that early, and there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of development, but so far so good. So far, so great.
Yeah, except for Martinsville.
You want to go there or no?
Oh, we'll get there. Okay. Like
I know you have like a long list, and I've got a long list too.
We've got a third of a season to get through right at this point. Like with Vegas, with like the last 3 years, we would have quote unquote close finishes where second place was trying to get the first. He just couldn't get past the barrier. right? But this year, when Truex was trying to chase down Busch, it's like I actually believed he can get to him and he can get by him. There was just a huge difference. I think he's going to get there. He ultimately didn't because the caution came out.
Yep.
But
I hate that caution came out so bad. Like it was a good finish anyway, but I wanted that validation for me selfishly, because I've been saying for years this is what our intermediate racing should look like, and I just wanted to have the personal validation that, see, he caught him and he passed him, just like I said we should have been doing.
no, that race really felt like something you would have seen in the early 2000s. Because at some point, in the last few months, I've watched like the '99 Las Vegas race, which came down to Jeff Burton and Ward Burton in a fight.
I remember that one, yeah.
Great, but getting the end though, it was just a good race, and then it came down to this duel between these brothers, and it was a race. And so this year felt close to that. It wasn't exactly, but it felt close to it.
That race was so memorable. It's funny you mentioned that race. I don't remember every single race that I watched when I was a kid. So 99, I would have been 11. But I remember I was actually at my grandparents' house that weekend. And I remember that was such an entertaining race that it's one of the handful of races from my childhood that I do remember. So
it's interesting. That race got play on like ESPN Classic a lot.
Yeah.
I remember that. It was like, oh, why are they showing this Las Vegas race? Oh, okay. All right.
That was old flat Vegas too. Wasn't it?
Have they reconfigured Las Vegas?
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No idea. All right. I'll take your word for it. So all right. So after Vegas, so far, like the two weakest races really have been Martinsville and to a degree Phoenix.
Yeah. So the original Vegas was 12 degrees, and then they reconfigured it to 20.
Okay. All right,
so yeah, flat Vegas.
Okay, did not know that. Didn't realize that. So how much of a problem? Like I said, the quote unquote worst races so far have been Martinsville.
If you say Richmond, we're going to fight.
I actually liked Phoenix. I liked Phoenix
too.
Yeah, because like it wasn't as good as last year's races, because last year's races I thought were phenomenal, especially the fall race. This wasn't a phenomenal race, but it had comers and goers. It had people you weren't expecting to be up front. And compared to pre-reconfiguration Phoenix, it was a very decent race. Because since they flip-flopped Phoenix, it's been putting on some great general overall racing, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. So I enjoyed Phoenix. I got nothing bad to say about Phoenix. I mean, listen, it wasn't like a barn burner. It had a good finish, and I think those who enjoy the dramatic finishes, check. Was it a bad race? No. Was it a fine race? It was a fine race with a really good finish. So I think that's kind of a memorable show.
Yeah.
Richmond, I know we all want to go back to Sealer Richmond and the action track, and we're just not there. And I do think we're going to see resin when we go back there for the playoff race to try to create that dynamic a little bit. But I enjoyed the strategy play, and I thought that race probably.
If you want an old school race, that was it.
Yeah, and I thought too, like that one had a really good finish too. And the thing that I was telling people, I would encourage everyone to go back to my Twitter. I was telling people with over 100 to go, if this stays green, we're going to get a great finish. Because I was already kind of doing the math in my head. I'm like, well, if this guy's pitting now, he's got to come back in here. And if he's on the two-stop strategy, they're going to converge 13 laps to go, and that's where it's going to flip. And it stayed green, and it played out that way. And
but it was not properly telegraphed on TV.
No, and there's been a lot of that this year, right?
Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden, oh, hey, here's Denny.
Yeah. I remember I walked back down to the infield. I watched that race from upstairs. So I walked back into the infield with 30 laps to go or so, and I dropped my book bag off in the media center. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that's when I heard Clint say, well, that 11's going to have a shot here. The 11 and the 4 is going to have a shot. And that was like the first time they had mentioned that possibility. And I was like, because I thought to myself when I walked in, I'm like, of course they do. Like we knew that 100 laps ago, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, TV did not know that 100 laps ago. But I thought that was dramatic, and I thought that was fun. And I loved talking to the crew chiefs. That was the cool part for me. This
Yeah. I
was
read
not,
your story about how they went
this
back.
was not
Yeah.
a this was not a race decided by Denny and Kevin and Kyle and who else was in the mix there? William.
Yeah.
It was a race for Rudy and for Gabehart and for Cliff Daniels, and I just thought it was a cool opportunity to talk about those guys because they're racers too, right?
Well, that's one thing I didn't know before I read that story you wrote was that I've always for a while now I've been viewing Rodney Childers as being like the last old school guy who doesn't exactly have a engineering degree under his belt. But I didn't know that that's also Chris Gabehart's
Yeah,
background. He's also an old school racer. I did not know that. So there's at least two of
Rudy.
them.
Rudy too.
Okay.
Rudy Fugle.
Okay.
Rudy Fugle is not from the engineering core.
Okay.
And here's the thing: crew chiefs are the role of a crew chief is very much changing, especially with this new car. The car chief is really the guy that, from a competition standpoint, makes the car work, especially with the old car. Where the crew chief was kind of more, and I don't say this to like diminish their smarts, but the crew chief is more of a general manager. He's kind of the head coach as opposed to the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. They have really good smarts. Like I know that Rodney and Gabe Hart, they're very smart mechanics, but they're not engineers. Their car chiefs are.
Yeah.
So their role is to make sure the right people are in place with the team, scheduling off days, off weeks. So there's a lot to unpack there, and that's probably the story. But I would say the role of the crew chief is starting to change, especially with a spec car. It's not going to be about building the car and who can build a better mousetrap, because everyone's mousetrap is basically the same. It's going to be about being able to manage people and make sure that you have the best structure in place. And that's where Gabe Hart and Rodney and Rudy and really all these guys, that's their role moving forward. I couldn't. Resin at Richmond. I think so, because what I found out that weekend is that we all want the sealer back. The sealer made for really good racing, and I think we're all pro sealer. My understanding is that the reason they don't use the sealer is actually EPA related.
I think I either heard this from you or someone else, but yeah, the EPA.
So they can't use that compound anymore, or they've been discouraged from using it. So now, okay, well, do we want to go resin? Do we want to go track bite? And I think we're removing the track bite from the equation now. It's ruined a lot of racetracks, and we don't want to make permanent decisions based on a temporary thought process. And we've seen what happened at Texas, where we're stuck with it. IndyCar is stuck with it. So, and plus, resin really worked out at Nashville. That was one of the best races.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for
first.
Nashville.
Me too.
Wait for it.
With this car, yeah, I hope so. So I think they want to try that too. The crazy thing about Richmond is it needs a repave. It really just needs a repave. It needs a repave, and maybe it's with the new car, and it is the new car. The new car has less horsepower too, and that's part of it. But I watched the first quarter of the Cup race from the grandstands, and then I moved up to the press box. Then I moved to the infield. I like to move around sometimes just to get different views of things. But what I realized was, and it's the same for the Xfinity cars too, so it's not just the Cup rules package or the Cup car.
Yeah.
They have to back the corner up so early now. Coming down the front stretch, they are lifting right at start finish line to make the corner. And it's so slow. It looks slow. I'm like, God, it's for the first time ever. I was like, it's slow, because I didn't go to Richmond at all during the pandemic. I wasn't there in 21, 20. My last race at Richmond was 2019. So in the span of 2019 to 2022, even the Xfinity cars are having to back the corners up so much more. And they're running the same rules package from 2019. And so that's just the track aging even more over the 3 years I didn't go there.
Mhm.
And so it used to be, they used to run up against the wall. You could
Yeah.
run Cup cars, Xfinity cars up against the wall. And because,
That's how it got its name. Like, was
yeah,
the action track.
and you had the two lines, right? You had the
Yeah.
guys who could run the bottom, the guys who were running the top, and they'd come together in the middle of the corner, and that's how guys bounce off each other, and that's what created the action. And so
Mhm.
now everyone's single file on the bottom, and they're just running qualifying laps, and they're having to back the corner up. So if you're not going to repave the track, maybe the resin will open up that second lane, but even then, I just don't think that's going to be enough for the
Do,
car that
do,
has
do
so
you
little power.
do you reconfigure it? Like, do you it's been over 30 years since it was last reconfigured. Do you do it again to some other thing?
I've never thought about that because in my head, I don't know that it needs to be, but I will say this. I think that
It's too big.
it might be too big. And that sounds crazy, right? Like it's not too big for the type of cars we used to have. But if we are going to, decrease power, and if the target is for a hybrid engine to produce that 550 range, maybe everything needs to be downsized a little bit, right?
Well,
And
but when you have drivers talking about, yeah, the arrow out there really got in the way. It's like, this is supposed to be a short track.
yeah,
We're not supposed to be talking about arrow at a short
but
track.
I think sometimes we lose track of the most important element, which is the tires, right? It's the one part of the car that's actually touching the track. So if
Mhm.
it's not the tires, it's this, or if it's not the track, it's the thing touching the track. And I do think that Goodyear, and I like everyone at Goodyear. I think they do a really good job to do the things that NASCAR and the teams are putting them in a box staff to do, but they're very conservative right now in terms of their compounds. And you watch those old races and you see the marbles and you see the rubber that gets laid down. I can't remember the last time I left a cup race, whether it's next gen or Gen 6. And I looked at the track and I'm like, look at that racetrack. Look at the rubber on the racetrack. Look at the marbles. It's like, I don't think that at all.
Well,
Ever.
I've never actually stopped to look at that. That's
Yeah.
never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Because to me, that's the most important thing. And that was the reason why, even at Martinsville, we were doing a lot of conversations about, is it the tires? And I think it's more than just the tires there. But I do think Goodyear needs to have a little more aggression. And we heard that both at Richmond and Martinsville. Because if the tire wears a little bit more, obviously driver management comes into play. So that's going to create a little bit more passing because you have one person who wants to save more for later.
Mhm.
Others want to have it early in a run. So that's part of it, right? But the other part of it is just it opens up that second lane, right? Because the more grip you have, it's easier to wrap around the bottom. And so if tire wear is off, then you have to search around for speed. Um, at Martinsville, I thought it was more than that. I think this new car is so draggy. That race at Martinsville reminded me of like my worst personal nightmare, which is the races in 2019 where they ran the big spoiler. They had 750, but they had the huge spoiler and the big.
But I mean, I haven't gone back and watched that race or anything like the race in 2019, but it's just that those races still, even though Martin Truex Jr. and like Brad Keselowski just completely whipped the field, in my head, those races still felt more competitive than what we got this year.
Listen, I think it was comparable. I don't know if it's better or worse. I mean, that's ultimately subjective, right? But it was in the same range. I think. Like I think you would put them in that same category, and they had very similar characteristics. I thought that corner speeds were so high for both of those style of races, the 2019 races and 2022, and for different reasons. 2019, it was the big spoiler, and you could drive in a lot deeper because you had a lot more grip, and you had a really hard tire. Because Goodyear, if you're going to have that much downforce, Goodyear has to respond by creating a tire that didn't wear at all. So same thing. There was no marbles. There was no rubber being laid down. Plus, it was cold. It was cold those races too. I remember it snowed.
Yeah.
Did it snow 2019?
Huh?
Didn't it snow before the 2019 race?
It was either 2019 or 18. Yeah,
Okay.
we're
But
yeah.
point
Both
is
both
corner
trucks and
speed.
Cup got moved to Monday or
Yeah,
truck.
corner
Yeah.
speeds were up for those races for that reason. So now the next gen does have it's a very draggy car. The big tires, the big brakes, very similar. You drive in a lot deeper in the corner. And so as a result, how do you where are you passing? How are you setting up a pass? Because
Mhm.
typically you set up your pass in corner entry. So if everyone can just drive in so much deeper now, how do you get under someone and then get back on the gas and finish your pass? There's no
Mhm.
way. It becomes a conveyor belt. So there are some things that worry me long term about Martinsville because you're not going to make the tire less grippy. I mean, you could change the compound, but it's still a very wide, inherently grippier car. Maybe you go with a smaller brake package. Maybe that's the answer for Richmond too. You
Mhm.
take away the added grip that comes with the big brake package. I don't know. I'm spitballing now,
Yeah.
right?
Oh no,
There's
I
I
I
don't
think
know.
that might be a good thing if you did make them smaller. But the thing that surprised me was like once everyone showed up at Martinsville and we got the practice and like everyone's like apparently shocked. Yeah, we're all shifting. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Like, wait, you weren't shifting before? Like, it that never occurred to me. Like, I assume if you're at a track and you have to slow down as much as they do, getting into that turn, that you would shift to do that, and then in order to speed up. So the fact that they weren't that
Well,
beforehand
the
was
fifth gear.
surprised me.
Yeah, well, the fifth gear is what changed that, right? I mean, they now have an literally an extra lever to pull with this car and with the transaxle that they never had with any previous Cup car before. So, it's funny. I actually completely changed my tune on this throughout the race, and we all did, right? The
Yeah.
race we thought we would see and the race we got, I don't think anyone expected that kind of race. I thought shifting would help the racing because I remember we've had a couple of kind of snoozers in Martinsville. I love Martinsville, right? I
Yeah.
love half miles, but this is not new to the next gen car. And I remember having a conversation with Kyle Busch a couple of years ago about, hey, what's wrong with Martinsville? And he said that it's the SMT data, and we all know Kyle Busch hates that everyone has
Yeah.
access to the SMT data. But he said to me, he said, if we're all looking at the best driver when they're braking, when they're lifting, their entry points in the corner, if we can replicate that, then we're all driving the same.
Yeah.
And so if everyone can then replicate what the best driver is doing, then they're all going to be the best driver. And then you're not going to pass. And that's happened at Martinsville sporadically. So I thought, well, if you're giving them another thing to do while they're driving, it becomes harder to replicate the SMT data because now you're having to work you're shifting, you're having to work the gears. And
Yeah.
I thought that's going to break up that sort of repetition. But I think the
Well,
thing that I
wasn't it
did,
Kurt Busch who said he felt like an octopus?
yeah,
Like
totally.
yeah, and he said like we're shifting at Martinsville. This is either awesome or insane.
Yeah,
And
that was a great quote.
just off that quote alone, I was like, oh, I thought the shifting was going to add something to it.
Yeah,
I
and
really
I did
did.
I did too. And but what made me change my tune on it was Denny Hamlin had said, when you're shifting that much, you're now no longer focusing on your entry point as well. You're not focusing on attacking. You're racing the track, is how he put it. He says you're racing the track and not the cars around you. And he said that oval racing is momentum based, and the moment that you're now having to add shifting to the equation, you're no longer racing the cars beside you. And I don't know if that's entirely true, but I think there's some merit to that. And I do think that we're probably going to go back there and we're not going to be shifting.
Well, Hamlin said last weekend, like NASCAR's been very open about getting advice from drivers, teams, whatever, about what to do in order to fix that. So, I mean, I'm makes me happy that NASCAR is, again, like I said earlier, not being sticks in the mud. They realize when they're not putting on something that's good and they want to make it better.
I think the drivers advisory council, is going to be so valuable in this era because listen, I know there's two trains of thought. There's the trains of thought of, well, the drivers are our best asset because they're the experts. If anyone knows
Mhm.
anything about racing, it's the racers. And then there's the train of thought, well, if the drivers like it, the fans don't. And I've always personally hated that. I think that the smartest people I know in racing are the racers. And that doesn't mean the drivers either. When I say racers, I mean drivers, crew chiefs, engineers. And typically they tend to be um, of the same thought process. And those racers, the drivers, crew chiefs, engineers in NASCAR for much of the
Mhm.
past half decade, have not been aligned. They have not been on the
Yeah.
same page at all.
Well,
We've seen it very publicly. NASCAR believes this,
mhm.
racers believe this, and they're not really seeing eye to eye.
No, well, remember, like at some point years ago,
The Atlanta repave
to,
package.
oh yeah, that uh, well, that's a Speedway Motorsports thing.
Sure.
That's a
When
we're
when I
only gonna.
say, let me correct because I don't want NASCAR people to get upset at me. When I say NASCAR, I don't entirely mean the sanctioning body, but I do mean the industry as a
Okay.
whole. So
Okay. So
not
okay.
NASCAR as
Okay.
in the National Association, but the NASCAR industry.
Okay. But yeah. Well, as I was gonna say, like Speedway Motorsports, they only apparently only consulted Kurt Busch
Yeah.
on that. So, but like, remember, it was a few years ago. I don't remember when. Like Tony Stewart, like complaining that none of the executives are racers; they're just executives. But now we got Ben Kennedy up in there, who does have racing experience. He's got a trophy, so he has credibility with, you know, hopefully he has credibility with people in the garage when it comes to stuff like this.
Yeah, but the thing that always blew me away. I'm going to give a lot of credibility to a Steve O'Donnell, which I don't know. Listen, competition has been his department the last several years, so ultimately it all falls on him anyway. But Steve O'Donnell has been around for a very long time. He's a smart racing guy, like truly. He's been around in the sanctioning body since the mid to late 90s. I don't remember the exact year that Steve started working for NASCAR, but he's been around for a long time. He knows good racing. But I think sometimes what happens, and this is what happened. This is what happened with Atlanta, with Speedway Motorsports. It's what happened with NASCAR and the NA18 rules package. Is sometimes your competition people are not totally aligned with your marketing people,
Mm,
and the needs of the competition people are not the same as your marketing people. And marketing people would say, well, we have data that says our fans want closer competition, they want more restarts, they want side by side racing, they want whatever. And then the competition people are like, yeah, but that's really not compelling racing. You need cars to be out of control and drivers wrestling the cars. And that's how you create crashing to get your restarts. But if you do that, you're not going to have side by side racing because you can only have side by side racing if cars are really easy to drive. And so I think sometimes the marketing people and the competition people don't see the same things in racing. And so I think,
and then you get the fan council questions that are like
well,
specifically tailored
yeah,
to
but I
get
think
something.
But I think the cool place where we've landed is to your point about Ben Kennedy. Ben Kennedy is a racer.
Mhm.
I believe Steve O'Donnell, at his heart, he's a racer. I believe that. And I think that if Steve Phelps, the president of NASCAR, can input, because he's a marketing guy. He is the definition marketing guy. If he can let his competition lieutenants do competition related things. And now they're working together with the Drivers Advisory Council, and that's spearheaded by Jeff Burton, who
Mhm.
is one of the absolute smartest people in racing. And the thing that's great about Jeff is I think Jeff has a lot of marketing savviness too. He works for TV, so he
Mhm.
understands the needs of TV. He's a racer, he understands the need of racers. And you put him in charge of this drivers advisory council, and he is kind of the liaison between the
Yeah.
sanctioned body and the drivers. I think that's actually how we've gotten to this really good place we're in right now, because you can have people who understand the needs of the marketing with
Mhm.
someone who understands competition, and all points are being weighed appropriately.
and he's a guy like he came up during the peak of NASCAR.
Mhm.
So like he's seen what's worked and what hasn't, and now he has his own son who's coming up through it right now. So he has the old school stuff to lean on, and he has his son's experience to help keep him informed about what's going on in the sport right now.
Well, the great thing about Jeff over the last, a lot of people could possibly view Jeff Burton as kind of a conflict of interest because of Harrison, right?
Yeah.
I get that. I just want to acknowledge that
Yeah.
argument's out there. I don't hold a lot of merit into that because I don't think Jeff is making decisions that will impact whether Harrison has a good run or not anyway, right? But the great thing about Jeff Burton is that because he has been so hands-on with Harrison over the last 10 years, is that he's been able to see NASCAR and stock car racing through several different lenses. Because when Harrison was running late models, he was with Harrison pretty much every single weekend that he wasn't doing TV, simultaneously to doing TV. So like the first part of the year, March, April, May, June, I would see Jeff every single week. I was at a short track race that Harrison was in. And so Jeff got a pretty good understanding of how do grassroots racers feel about NASCAR and what are the things they do really well that we could do. I'll give you a really good example. We went to South Alabama Speedway for the Rattler 250. And you can find this on my YouTube page too. There's an interview with me talking to Jeff. And he says, what we really need in NASCAR is like, everyone says we need more short track races. And it's like, oh, well, we have Martinsville and we have Richmond. He's like, no, we need a real short track race like this place. And South Alabama is like 3/8 of a mile. He's like, we need a tiny 3/8 of a mile, a quarter mile. Guess what we had this year? We had a quarter mile cup race in Los Angeles. And I would not be surprised if, Jeff's perspective and feedback was included in that too. So that's a very broad, long-winded way of saying, I trust right now. I want to be very clear about this. I trust the people who are making decisions and their level of communication, which is now stronger than it has been the last 5 years, to get us to really good places. And it's because of everyone that kind of knows their role and they're just communicating so well.
So what did you think of Atlanta?
So I wrote a column on it, and I said, I said, and I can't remember exactly how I worded it, but I said that ultimately the Atlanta that we knew was gone.
Yeah.
And it was going to go away no matter what. And even if you repaved it exactly to spec, the Atlanta you knew and loved, one was immediately not coming back. And it might not ever come back because these repaves can be so flimsy and sensitive or
just too good.
Sometimes they're too good. But, it's funny because I remember when they repaved Kentucky, they had said, we used an aggregate that's going to wear really quickly. And they managed to make that place Texas. They made Texas worse. That wasn't just it was the layout too, right?
Yeah.
But there's no guarantee Atlanta was going to come back and be what it was. So that's consideration one. Consideration two, right, wrong, or indifferent, Marcus Smith had always wanted his own Daytona or Talladega. Yeah. And he probably wasn't going to extend Atlanta by a mile. He doesn't have the blueprint, the footprint on that facility to do that. Plus, it's super expensive. He found a way to successfully replicate to a degree the Daytona Talladega experience. And I thought that was probably the best version of that vision there was. And then lastly, I would just say that I don't want to do it everywhere, but I love diversity, right? I said that I like dirt. I want one more dirt race. Give me Knoxville. Knoxville is the granddaddy of them all. Give me Knoxville. And how about this for a spoiler? I don't think Bristol dirt is long for this world.
I think it's 3. I think you can do 3 and get out.
Well, maybe not 3, but I think a second race at Bristol is not long for this earth. I
Oh,
think we're only going to have the fall race because
okay.
why? And it's super obvious if you think about it.
Nashville.
No, no, no. Think in terms of this weekend.
Oh, this. Oh, wait. Wait. Previous weekend or upcoming weekend?
No, this past weekend. What was in the news this past weekend? It's an hour away from Bristol, North Wilkesboro.
Oh,
So, are you telling me that Marcus Smith, using some state funding, some of the state funding passed down from the federal rebuilding
eight,
plan,
$18 million.
yep, you're going to put that kind of money into North Wilkesboro and it's not going to have a cup race?
Well, that's
I
what
don't
like
get
he
it.
said this weekend. He doesn't anticipate a
As I
cup
know, I know what
cup
he
race.
said. I know that he said that, and like I'm going to take him for his word. But I also believe that
Yeah, how do you bring it back? And okay, well, we're gonna send trucks. Yeah,
right.
that doesn't like it doesn't make sense.
And people keep saying, well, Rockingham didn't work out. Well, that was a different era too. I think the expectations of what a NASCAR race is supposed to look like in terms of attendance and TV and all these different things, we're in a different place now. I think in some ways we're it's sad because NASCAR is no longer a it's way more niche than even it was before. I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound insulting, but I think
Yeah.
NASCAR realized they are who they are again, right? They were not going to always be the number two to the NFL.
Mhm.
That was a great period that we were all fortunate to live as fans in the industry. We're now back to our niche. And so I think that niche actually allows us collectively, the industry, to it opens up our playbook of places we can go, things that we can do that well we're not saying well, we have to have 80,000 people at a minimum or it's a failure. Marcus wants to go back to Nashville and he's only going to build 30,000 seats because in his mind 25 to 30,000 people in person is a good day as long as you have the TV money to augment your
So
revenue.
I think we need to preface when we mention Nashville at this point. Are we talking about Fairgrounds or Super
Fairgrounds,
Speedway?
the
Because he now
fairgrounds.
owns both.
Yeah, you're right, right.
Or
And
he doesn't own the Fairgrounds, but you know what I mean. So
right. He has the contract to both, and he
yeah,
owns the other. Um, but I think that if you have 25,000 people show up to a cup race at Wilkesboro now, that's fine. And that's the reason why they lost the race before. Is like, well, we have to go to these places like Texas where we can have 130,000 people. We don't live in that world anymore. We do live in a
yeah.
world where you're getting paid by the TV
Mhm.
dollar. And if you have 25,000, 30,000 people show up, that's okay. And so
All,
I do think we're going to
just the visual of a full
yes,
grandstand
yeah.
goes a long way. I
Mhm.
mean, look at the national race last week. I mean, that wasn't not last week, last year. That wasn't by definitions of other tracks a lot of people,
No,
but they
like 40K.
some I don't know something like that. But it was full. It was
It was
packed,
full.
and
It was a full
you
40K.
had and the only downside was that you had the bad traffic reports getting in, which
I was there. I was there.
yeah,
It was rough.
yeah.
It was rough. But
So
as Marcus said this weekend, he's like, if you have a really popular big
yeah,
event, it's going to have traffic. I go to
yeah,
Cubs games all the time. Guess what? There's traffic in the middle of downtown Chicago where
yeah,
that ballpark is.
yeah.
Comes with the territory. You're not going to have easy ingress and egress when you have 30, 40,000 people show up. So
Yeah,
anyway,
like
to kind of go full circle here, though, I do believe, and there is no insight. This is not reporting.
mhm.
I just believe that if you kind of read Marcus Smith's playbook, his vision right now is he wants to be able to have flexibility with his properties. Maybe you can have 1 year go down to Nashville Fairgrounds. Maybe 1 year you can go down to the Super Speedway. Maybe 1 year you can go to Wilkesboro instead of the second Bristol date. And keep in mind, the only reason we're doing Bristol Dirt is the spring race was not working.
Yeah,
No one was showing up. It was not. It didn't feel like a big deal. The number of people who were showing up to Bristol would pack out Wilkesboro, and it's the same market. Like it's a little more than an hour away. It's the same demographic, the same market. So if you're going to get those same people at a Bristol, and you can diversify the schedule. You can go back to your oldest track, NASCAR's oldest track. That's a win-win. And I just think that it'll take them a couple of years to get there, right? You're going to have to renovate the facility. You're going to have to renovate the grounds and the parking lot. And Marcus Lemonis is going to invest in the city, and he's building a Gander Mountain. And there's some other things in the county that's going to happen first. My gut tells me a decade from now, Cup racing back at Wilkesboro.
Oh, that's a long way off. My one thing is
I'm trying to give myself some runway, right? Like, I think the truck
you're hedging. You're hedging.
Well, it's not even. I'm trying to be realistic, because I think that if Marcus said the earliest a truck race could be there is 2024,
yeah.
Well, let's say maybe realistically then this 25. So that's 3 years from now. So okay, well maybe a couple of years of trucks, 25, 26, 27. It's successful, and the Bristol dirt experiments kind of wore thin now. And then it's like, well, we've got Wilkesboro over here, and we're still not really doing well with our spring date. Let's move it there. So that's why I say within 10 years. So maybe 7.
My thing, I think over the weekend, Marcus said, so the infrastructure just couldn't hold a cup race. Well, in my opinion, back in 2020, this sport really changed, went to great lengths in order to put on races under very extreme circumstances, and did it. I believe NASCAR can go to great lengths to make the show whatever the show needs to be in order to fit the infrastructure at a place like North Wilkesboro. So,
well, I would say this. So have you ever been to North Wilkesboro?
I have not. I have not, unfortunately.
God, I would just encourage you, man. If you could, and I know it's easier said than done. If you get the chance to come out to the racetrack revival thing they're doing, see the place as it is right now, right? It's kind of a better version of what it is right now, and just see what the property looks like. You could see a version of that place where it's basically Martinsville. Are you telling me that like Martinsville doesn't work? Martinsville works fine. And kind of the parking infrastructure, you could replicate what they do at Martinsville at Wilkesboro. Like the
parking's on hills. The parking is on grass, and like there's no paved.
That's the argument. By the way, that's the argument against North Wilkesboro. It's like, well, you have all these hills, and it's going to be really hard to park people. And I'm like,
have you seen Bristol?
In Bristol, but Bristol's all paved, and they've done a really
no, it's not all paved. There's plenty of grass parking.
Well, I know there is, but I'm saying in the immediate footprint of the speedway that is all paved near the drag strip. That's all paved. So I'm saying you could do that similar thing with Wilkesboro too over the course of. They've owned Bristol now 30 years. That's why I say Martinsville, give it 10 years, because you're going to have to. It's more than just the racetrack, the facility itself. It's the parking, nearby towns, and your roads in, your ingress or egress. And so there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm telling you right now, like the nearby infrastructure, if it works at Martinsville, and it does, like Martinsville, we treat Martinsville, it's NASCAR's oldest track.
Yeah.
Well, now SMI, well, it's not SMI, it's Speedway Motorsports. That's their Martinsville. And so now each company has their piece of the 1948 schedule back on the Cup schedule.
Yeah. So like go back to Atlanta. Like I enjoyed it. I was afraid to look away from the TV screen because I was afraid I was going to miss something. And I at no point in the last 10 years could I have said that about Atlanta.
I'll say this. Was it too long?
Oh yeah.
500 miles of that?
No, absolutely not.
I don't even think 400 miles we're going to do next or June. I think 350. Give me the Pocono treatment, because we're all just trying to get to the point. The point is the end, the big crash and the finish. Yeah. Let's make it 350.
But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. But as I wrote in my column, I don't like the reasons I'm enjoying it. Like I mean, 4 super speedways was perfectly fine. So much stuff's been done within the NASCAR umbrella over like the last 3 years to make things cheaper for teams and stuff. Okay, so we're going to throw in 2 more super speedway races, 2 more chances to just demolish a car, and it's just like, come on. Like we didn't did we? But I mean, it worked. There were more people in the.
You know what I enjoyed about that race more than because to me it was like my worst nightmare realized. It was everything about NA18D but a success. It was like it was the first track built with NA18D in mind. Like truly it was.
Yeah.
Now as it turns out it's going to be the only race that hopefully, knock on wood, it's going to be the only type of NA18D style racing that we have. But the thing that I really did enjoy about it is if I enjoyed Richmond because it was a really good opportunity to spotlight crew chiefs, I really enjoyed Atlanta because that was a great opportunity to spotlight spotters in a way that you can't even do at Daytona and Talladega, because at Daytona and Talladega, there is a lot of just riding and things happen very slow. There's action, but it takes a while to build up to a crescendo. Mm-hmm. But Atlanta, because it's a mile and a half of super speedway racing, holy cow, the spotters were going through 4 or 5 batteries.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And they go through 1, maybe 2 for Daytona, Talladega. They were going through 4 or 5 because they were constantly on the button, working their drivers through it. And I thought the skill set to thrive in that Atlanta race was so much greater than even Daytona and Talladega. And I respected that in a way that I didn't think that I would.
Like, so for one thing, I'm going to Talladega this weekend to cover it. With first time I've covered a race at Talladega. I've been to one race at Talladega. Talladega is a bad place to watch a race. Like here they come and they're gone. Let's wait. What?
I grew up there, so trust me. I went to races there as a kid, and I used to go up to the old backstretch grandstands, and I watched races there. And I remember as a kid, I was bored out of my mind, and I loved racing. Like my dad's a racer. I mean, we went there every spring, and I just thought to myself, I can't wait to go home and watch this race. Well, I'm not watching it now.
Yeah.
But I haven't watched the race in the grandstands there in a long time. Yeah. But I have from the press box, and I'm like, thank God I've got TV.
Yeah, but my point is like the in-person experience at Daytona. Well, Daytona's kind of okay.
By the way, I say that because back then we didn't have the video boards when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's Kevin. I don't want to knock Talladega because they've done a lot to improve the fan experience, whether it's Wi-Fi at the racetrack for fans, the big screen so you can tune into the radio. There's things you can do to amplify that experience. But I'm saying as a kid, we didn't have that, and I'll be honest, it sucked.
Yeah, but my point being, it's Atlanta. It's only a mile and a half, so the field is gone for far shorter amount of time in a given lap. And you can. I'm guessing I've never been in the grandstands at Atlanta. I'm guessing you got a good shot of the back.
I have, and it's hard.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a little hard, but there's places where it's better. But keep in mind it's an old track. It's an old track, and they really optimized mile and a half seating after that. Like I hated that Kentucky turned out to be not a really good racetrack because I thought the way they built that track kind of. Have you been to Kentucky?
No.
It's kind of nestled into a valley, and it was a really great place to watch a mile and a half race because all the seats were really good in a way that Atlanta wasn't. But to your point, though, it is easier to watch a race even as Atlanta is compared to Talladega.
So just saying that the ticket probably has more value for a fan at Atlanta than you would at Talladega or Daytona, because I would never send someone to their first NASCAR race to Daytona or Talladega. Would never. Well,
depending on who they are, you might send them to Talladega. It ain't gonna be about the racing.
No. If
I learned a lot as an Alabamian, I learned a lot of life education. In the parking lots and the infield at Talladega, I learned a lot about life there. Didn't learn a lot about racing, but I learned a lot about life.
Well, I was like, if I'm giving someone a ticket, okay, you're going to your first NASCAR race, you're to sit in the stands. I'm not sending them to Daytona or Talladega.
No,
and that's why I kind of hate that they do Daytona 500 is the first race of the year, because it's just not representative. Oh, 8 million people are going to tune in. Okay, so if they
But it's the same thing as the Indianapolis 500, right? I mean, that place is not. There's not a good seat in the
but
house. And you're going there because you're going for the spectacle and the history. And
but still, I'm talking the style of racing though. That's not far off from other ovals you can get in IndyCar. So I'm just saying, like, the style of racing you get at Daytona is just not the same that you're gonna get the next week. Which what was the second race this week? Oh, Auto Club. You're not gonna get that at Auto Club. You're not gonna get that at Kansas. It's like it's just not representative. And so it's always bugged me that
me too. Because if you try to get someone to tune in and make them a fan, you give them the Daytona 500, and then it's like, well, next week we're gonna give you Las Vegas, or we're gonna give you,
it's just
whatever. Maybe it's easier if you go from Daytona to I don't know, short track or whatever. Maybe Phoenix, but it was always hard to me when we went from like Daytona to Atlanta. Because it's like Daytona is exciting. It's Daytona 500 and side by side racing, and then we're gonna go to Atlanta where it's spread out and single file. And maybe for a racing geek like me, there's things that I can pick out of that to enjoy. But if you're trying to hook a casual fan, it's the same as going from the Indianapolis 500 to Belle Isle. And I've always hated that. They have screwed up so bad going from the pageantry and the excitement of the Indianapolis 500 to the streets of Belle Isle. Go to Texas.
Okay. You said this on Twitter, and I agree with you. When it comes to IndyCar, I hate street courses. Hate them.
I do now. I didn't always feel that way. I thought the DW12 was a really good street racing car. This car is not. But to be fair, this car is not a good racing car in a lot of places.
Okay.
IndyCar is competition product.
But
it's struggling right now.
But anyway, I just can't. Like, mostly because it's open wheel and you can't avoidable contact penalties for the most part.
Which is why the old DW12, it was that big brick of a car. They were literally bouncing off each other back then. I love that. I was like a total redneck for that. I'm like, give me car drivers beating and banging like it's Martinsville. Will Power getting out and giving the bird to Sebastian Bourdais at I forget which track it was. It might have been Toronto for one of the duels. Was it the 2 and TO is what they called it? But no, you're right. It's not a good racing product now with single file.
But that's why I'm excited for the prospect of a cup race on a street course in Chicago, potentially next year. And you said you're excited for that too.
Have you seen, and these are all on YouTube, have you ever watched a NASCAR Pinty Series race at Toronto or GP3R?
No.
Watch them. It'll make you go, this can work.
I think just the one reason I think NASCAR could work is bumpers.
Sure.
It's very confined spaces.
It's already working in a NASCAR series. So it's not even like, is NASCAR style racing compatible with street courses? Well, I don't know. I've never seen it. I have seen it. They do it twice a year, every year. And it's fantastic because it's Martinsville, a good Martinsville with right turns for all the reasons that when Martinsville really works, long straights with very short, abrupt turns.
Yeah.
That's street courses. And the Pinty Series has a really good street racing product.
But no, just because of the close confines, like Long Beach, a couple weeks ago, that final lap, it was thrilling. Can he get there? Well, it doesn't. There's not a lot he could do once he gets there to get to the leader, right? But if you got a car of fenders, he could do something.
And I've seen that time after time. And I think the closest thing we've actually seen in national touring to a street course is actually the road course at Montreal. Because Montreal was very long straightaways, very short, abrupt turns on a flat racetrack. There was no elevation in Montreal. And I would ask any NASCAR fan to give me a better series of races than the Xfinity Series at Montreal for 5 years. Every single one of those races they slapped. They were awesome. And if Montreal worked for Xfinity, I'm telling you, a street course race would work for anywhere.
It bugs me that the 2000s and the the 2010s, NASCAR sent Xfinity to Mexico, sent Xfinity to Canada, but not Cup for some reason. I don't get why you don't send your Premier Series into those markets.
Well, back then there was no flexibility for Cup for all the reasons we talked about, right? We were just living in an era where we had a very structured mentality about where Cup could go. The Furco lawsuit had just been filed and won, and so we weren't going to move Cup races anywhere. And that's the reason why we lost Montreal is the promoter there said we want a Cup race, and NASCAR said no. And there were also some bills that were not paid. And I know it's not so cut and dry, but really that's what it came down to. That's not true anymore. And it goes back to what I said about Wilkesboro. The expectation of what a Cup race is supposed to be is now changed, and it gives you a lot of flexibility to go places that you couldn't go 15 years ago because the sport is just in a different place. And so if there was ever, I mean, they're going to go do a street race. Like they've already kind of tipped their hand, right, with the iRacing Chicago.
Yeah.
They're going to. So to me, what's really exciting as a race fan is that I want my series to be the most diverse. I want to be able to say that my champion as a NASCAR fan can excel on road courses, street courses, dirt, short oval, long oval. To me, it's kind of what made USAC really awesome back in the day. We're talking about Parnelli and AJ and Mario, that to win the USAC national championship, you had to be good at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but you had to be good at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. You had to be really good at Toledo, and you had to be really good on street courses and dirt tracks. Well, I'm not saying that it's apples to apples, but the Cup Series, the modern IndyCar Series, which evolved out of the old USAC National Championship, evolved into Diet Formula One with a handful of ovals. The modern NASCAR is evolving into what the old USAC National Championship used to be, because you have street courses, dirt races, road courses, short ovals, long ovals, and that's the reason we hold Mario and AJ and Parnelli in such high esteem, because they were so diverse. Well, to be a Cup Series champion now, you have to be diverse. And that's cool.
All right. So, Matt, okay, we're going to start closing this out. So, are we getting to 16 different winners in the regular season? Because we are currently at 8 through 9 races. Tyler Reddick hasn't won yet. He's beating on the door. Daniel Suarez hasn't won yet. Has a good chance of winning. And there's so many. Half of JGR hasn't won. No one at Stewart Haas has won. Got guys at Penske, or Blaney hasn't won. Logano hasn't won.
Yep.
Can we get to 16?
So in any other universe, I would have said no, it's not happening. And under the previous generation of cars, not happening, because eventually an organization is going to find something and they're going to just roll off wins. Well, with a spec car, what do you find? Like you're literally, it's the same pieces. You can't develop that piece that's going to let you roll off 4 out of 7. I think there's a shot. I'm not going to prognosticate and say yes. I'm not going to say no, because I don't know. My gut says no, because it's still really, really hard. And I still think even within the confines of a spec car, you're going to find something. Some organization is going to find something. You're already seeing it now. There's certain teams and manufacturers that are doing better. But you just said it, right? Like Harvick and Truex, and finally Busch got one. But all these marquee names, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that a Roush Fenway Keselowski car wins at Talladega, given what they did in the duels, right? Like Buescher and Keselowski proved they had a good super speedway package. So yeah, it's possible. Like
throw in colleague racing. Like it's entirely possible that they could pull. Justin Haley could pull one out. It's like Allmendinger could get another one at a. Well, he's not running for points, so
no, that's still the owner's chase, though.
So yeah, so
I like the owner's chase. It gives me another storyline to follow.
So, but there's just so many possible drivers who could win who haven't yet. Um, so okay, we're gonna do rapid fire, and then I'll let you go. I'm gonna give you 3 mulligans. A a race mulligan where you get to get a redo on some race in the past. I'm giving you a silly season mulligan and a NASCAR sanctioning body decision mulligan. So first off, give me a race from the past you want a mulligan on.
So I don't quite understand the dynamic here. What do you mean a mulligan?
You want the situation to play out differently. Like,
oh, I see. Okay. This is good. This is a good idea. The one that I want to play out differently.
the people involved, they get to do they have the knowledge of what happened, so they get to do it over again.
Yeah.
So
man, dude, I've watched so many races over the years, and it's hard because I want to go back to like my fandom, right? Like I published a story today. Like I want 2007 to play out differently because I was a Jeff Gordon guy,
yeah.
and I think of the way that those races played out, and so that's where my head immediately goes. I don't know if that really counts to the spirit of this
One
kind
race,
of conversation.
this one race.
Oh man, I'll tell you what. 2007 Daytona 500 because I'm such a Mark Martin guy.
Oh yeah,
and I think Mark did everything he was supposed to do to win that race and played out the way that it did. And it doesn't change Mark's career, and he says it all the time. Winning a championship, winning a Daytona 500, it doesn't change how we feel about Mark. It doesn't change how the industry feels about Mark. But me, knowing Mark so well, I want it for him. I want that for him.
A while back, someone posted on Twitter like the onboard camera from Harvick from like the last 7 laps of that race. And that final restart, I don't know what he did, but he just came up like a rocket on the outside. There was no way Mark was going to stop him.
No.
At all. It was wild to watch. So my mulligan is the 2011 Coke 600. Dale Jr. I just give me 2 more drops of fuel in that car.
Yeah. Was that the Mears win?
No, that was Junior running out of gas in turn 4 and Harvick coming by and winning. So both of ours are related to Kevin Harvick.
That was 2007, right? Mears won the 600, or
yeah, I want to say
Mears has a 600, right?
On fuel mileage? Yeah, that's his one win. Yeah.
Okay.
That's his one win. Okay. So your silly season mulligan.
There's 2 ways this could go, right? Because there's the decision that wasn't made, or the decision that was, or it could have been a different decision. How about this? Give me yours so I can think about it. Because you're hitting me with the question, and I've got to think, but you already know your answer. So give me yours and let me think.
I think mine is like there was like this brief window. I think maybe in like 95 or 96 where Dale Sr. kind of broached the possibility of going to like Robert Yates. Have you heard about this?
I have, yeah.
Because Robert Yates Racing was on the rise then, and RCR was kind of petering out. So I would have loved to see what have been like if Dale had jumped ship and gone over to like the 28 or the 88 or whatever, and right when things were getting good there, and see what like 96 to 99 could have been like.
So the one that's immediately jumping out to me, I don't think it would have played out well, but I think I would have liked to have seen it. I thought that Rusty Wallace probably retired too soon. I still thought that he was racing at a high level when he finally stopped in 2004. And I thought that if he, especially with the chase for the championship, there's probably the potential of him having maybe a championship season, a lot more wins. I just thought that he hung him up too soon. There was an offer for him to join DEI. And this would have been after Dale Jr. left. And
I don't think I've ever heard this.
Yeah. And Rusty ultimately decided he was too far removed from the car, and he just decided against it. And
Maybe I have
things,
heard this. Maybe I have.
things fell apart very quickly for DEI. They brought
Yeah.
in you had Mark and Mark Martin and Martin Truex splitting
Hmm.
there was the merger with the '01 car.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if that changes the dynamic. I don't know if Rusty is any good there, but I would like to. I always thought Rusty, and I say this as a Jeff Gordon guy, so obviously fandoms are not compatible, but I'm also a racing guy. And I thought Rusty Wallace was so good for the sport, his personality and the way that he drove cars. I would have liked to have seen Rusty in a really good car longer than he was actually in the car. I thought he just quit way too soon. He had a lot more to give race fans, and I think he's admitted that too since then.
Right. So, what is your sanctioning body NASCAR decision? That I'm taking out the high downforce package. Can't be
Yeah,
related to that.
I know. Yeah. Well, give me yours. Let me think about it.
Probably the 5-year agreement with the tracks. That's probably it. Like we discussed it at the top. It's like the rebound for the sport could have started a lot sooner. So I think that's probably it.
I'm trying to avoid dead air here, but there's just a lot of different things that I can think of. So on one hand, I'm not like the diehard traditionalist that says, well, we still should have a year long championship and no playoff. But I sometimes wonder because like I watch
Mm.
the World of Outlaws and they've got 90 races and there's no playoff and it's great. Um,
I just got exhausted from you saying 90 races.
yeah, well, it's a different kind of format too. So there's a part of me that wants to say maybe never instituting the playoffs, but on the other hand, I like covering the playoffs. Like the fan in
Yeah.
me, the fan in me is kind of like, well, I'm a traditionalist, and it's robbed us of a couple of pure quote unquote champions. But also there's the storyteller in me where it's like I look forward to the fall, colder weather and football and the NASCAR playoffs,
Cinnamon Coca-Cola.
cinnamon Coca-Cola if they ever bring it back. Um, I mean, can I answer this by saying the decision collectively from the whole industry, NASCAR and SMI, to replicate Charlotte everywhere? Because
Yes, there you go.
that's
There
not
you
one
go.
decision, but it's kind of a philosophical thing, right? It was like, well, we need to have Texas and build Chicagoland and build Kansas. And I think that redundancy, we're still feeling those decisions
Yeah.
today. We're talking so much about dirt and street courses.
Yeah.
That is a direct correlation to the hole that we dug ourselves in
Yeah.
30 years ago by building all those mile and a halves. And I
They
like
they
a
they,
couple of them.
they built to the demand without thinking about long-term keeping the demand.
Well, I don't think they saw how the engineering of the sport would evolve too. Those races early on were better than the ones today. We learned a lot more about aero, and
Mhm.
we've made those tracks worse as an industry because we're smarter than we were. We're now hiring NASA engineers to be on cup
Yeah.
cars, and that wasn't the case in 1996.
Mhm. No, I actually, yes, I love your choice. That's the choice. I'm hoping to interview Marcus Smith soon for a story for Speed Sport, and I'll ask him like, okay, if Marcus Smith of now could go sit in on a Speedway Motorsports board meeting back in like 94, 95, and you could offer one piece of advice to them, what would it be? Knowing what you know now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see what his answer would be. So
not to reconfigure Bristol. So you're having to put dirt on it 20 years later.
Yeah.
15 years later.
So, all right, Matt Weaver. Thank you for your third visit to Dropping the Hammer. This was fun. I'm really glad we got to do this. So this is always fun. So
I would say any time, but that would sound disingenuous because I'm so hard to get a hold of. But I really do. I enjoy doing this. It's always a good time. So seriously, thank you for having me on, and I'll try to be more cooperative in the future. It's not intentional. I love doing the show with you. So anytime I can, I will.
So you have a Cubs game to go watch. Where can everyone find your stuff, including at racingamerica.com?
Yeah, racingamerica.com, Matt Weaver RA on Twitter now. I've since
Mhm.
changed it and lost my my blue check.
Oh,
Facebook, Matt Weaver Motorsports, and that's pretty much the trifecta.
all right. That's it. This has been Dropping the Hammer with Dan McFadden. I'm Dan McFadden. You can reach me at Dan McFadden on Twitter, danmcfadden@gmail.com, and you can follow the YouTube page at youtube.com/Dan McFadden. Please like and subscribe to this podcast so other people will find it. But yes, this has been Dropping the Hammer with Dan McFadden. Thank you, Matt Weaver, for joining us. Talk to you guys again next week.